Okay, let's take a look at today's introductions. So, the question, some people suggest that shops should not be allowed to sell imported food. Instead, they should sell the food produced in the local area. Do you agree or disagree? Now, this is a topic that Shaku, I think that's how you pronounce his name, said that he had in the exam yesterday. So, pretty current. Let's take a look at it. So, someone suggests, so it's a simple opinion essay. According to some, shops should sell locally produced food rather than now an imported one, or rather than imported ones. Well, ones, I mean foods. Right. Now, I utterly agree. Now, that doesn't really work in terms of collocation. You can completely agree, or totally, but utterly, that's not what we usually use in collocation with agree. I utterly agree with a statement. We'll consider how it boosts the nation's economy. Okay, that's good. Secondly, we'll consider imported foods waste government's funding. Oh, right. So we'll consider how imported food waste government's funding. Why would the government be funding imported foods? I don't really see how that works. How imported foods, how can they waste government's funding or government spending, as it may get rotten due to poor food safety management? So, okay, I'm not really sure about that part, but apart from that, okay, it's not too bad. According to some, selling food from a source of import. Oh, import from source of import. What does that mean? You mean imported foods. Now, there's some things that you cannot paraphrase. There's some things that you cannot paraphrase. They just don't work. So, instead of this, selling food from a source of import, make it imported food. Because that, a synonym, that doesn't really work. From a source of import. Okay, imported food. Now, does it say banned? Okay, it should not be allowed, which is kind of banned, and people ought to sell the food which is produced in their own country. I completely agree, and will argue the importance of supporting intrinsic production. Intrinsic, what? Internal or home production, and expanding the number of job opportunities in the country is the two main reasons. Okay, that's not so bad. Just watch that, because that source of import, that doesn't quite work out. It's not a decent idea. Well, it doesn't say about it being an idea. It just said it shouldn't be allowed, which is not the same thing. To give permission, well, it doesn't say that either. It simply says some people suggest that shops should not be allowed to sell imported foods. That's all it says. Yeah, so it's not a decent idea to give permission. Well, as I said, idea, that's not the same thing. Permission for sales of imported dish or dishes. I suppose that's, well, right. Addition food is not quite the same thing. Food is the basic raw materials, and dishes are what you make out of food. So that's not quite the same. So, according to some, they think that instead of doing that, local juice food should be sold there. I partly agree. Selling this kind of food cannot be impetus, the economic growth. Cannot be impetus. Well, that doesn't work, does it? Well, so we've got a verb, impetus. What's that? It's a noun, impetus, the economic growth. Or that doesn't work in terms of structure. Do you mean it cannot stimulate economic growth? Maybe, which is not quite the same thing. Even if it is a much more preferable choice than imported one. Than what? The imported one, or than imported food. Don't use one without us knowing what it is, without preferable choice and imported food. Now, why would you partly agree? Now, when you go on to write the rest of the essay. You know, it's easier to come down on one side or the other. I agree, I disagree. Because if you partly or partially, your essay might get a little bit messy, you know. So I would always come, unless you're really confident in your English abilities, I would be tempted to simply come down on one side. I agree, I disagree. Now, don't know what this is. We're going to be removing people who don't have clearly recognisable names. They don't have to be your real name, but we do want recognisable names, no numbers or symbols, etc. There's no doubt that selling imported food is by far the most popular what? That's an adjective. What? The most popular what? In many parts of the world. Okay, but what's that got to do with the topic? Nothing. So that first sentence is basically redundant. Some people recommend, well, they don't, they simply say it. It's not a recommendation. That stores should not be permitted to sell food, which comes from another country. In other words, imported foods. Okay. Alternatively, shops should deliver. Well, shops don't deliver or kind of, well, make it stock, because it's not talking about that. It's about people going into a shop. Locally produced food. I agree with to some extent. Again, why is it to some extent? Again, unless you're really confident in your ability to pull this kind of essay off, it's easier to simply go yes or no, because it doesn't have to be your real view. Right? It's not a truth test. I agree to some extent, but I don't think it's forbidden completely. Well, it's not forbidden. That's a bit kind of strong. Banned. It's not quite the same thing. Forbidden is kind of strong. Okay, but that's not bad. According to according to some, we want a comma. According to some, what? Okay, according to some, shops, oh dear, should not be allowed to sell foreign food. Right, that's better, because that is nonsense. Shops not only ought to become forbidden to... No. Okay, so according to some, comma, shops should not be allowed to sell foreign food. But there is no but. There is no but. Just also. Also, local products should be sold by them alternatively. What does this mean? So, according to some, shops should not be allowed to sell foreign food, but, right, only, this makes more sense, local products should be sold by them or in them. Right, now that makes sense now, okay? Although we cannot deny its economical aspects, its economic aspects, cannot deny what the economic aspects of this idea. Okay, because, and why is this a separate sentence? This idea, just put a comma. Because the world is a tiny village and helping each other's economy is the best way to progress. Okay, that's not too bad, but some of the phrasing word order here, it doesn't quite work out. Some people are of the belief that shops should be restricted to sell imported food. Instead, they must concentrate on selling inner products. Inner products? Inner? I suppose you think that's a synonym for local products. I personally agree it's local business friendly. It's a law. Well, it's not a law yet. It's what some people think. Essential for the quality of life of indigenous peoples. I will discuss them. Right, well, that's a completely wasted sentence. What does that? That tells us nothing. As I said in previous videos, don't write these useless, empty sentences. This essay will give reason to this. We know that's what you'll do because that's what you're told to do. So simply get on, get it done. Tell us what you're going to do, where the essay is going. It's clear there are various types of food in the shops, including imported and local. Okay, useless. We don't need that. Oh dear. Sorry. We don't need that sentence. It doesn't actually say anything. Okay, now to the point. Some people argue that local food should be shown by certain shops instead of imported ones. Ones, again, food. Okay. I do believe that selling only local food in the shops is completely preposterous. Why? So that's only half an introduction. Why do I acknowledge that a great deal of importance must be placed on the produced foods? Irrelevant. Sorry, a bit of noise outside my office window. That first sentence, irrelevant. While some ocean sell foreign food, the plus points should not be ignored. How is this an introduction? It's only half finished. Sentence 1, irrelevant. Just like this one. Sentence 1, irrelevant. And it's only answering half of the question. So that needs a bit of work, I think. So let's have a look. So again, watch your collocations. Right? I completely agree. I totally. And why not just simply agree? No idea what that means. That doesn't work. The source of import. Not a decent idea. Impetus-y economic growth. That doesn't work. Irrelevant sentence. Okay, what's this? Word order. A lot of that, it doesn't make sense. It needs to be rewritten, as you can see. Empty sentence doesn't explain anything. Don't need that sentence. The rest of the introduction is missing. Don't need that sentence. And where is the rest of the introduction? So, a few things for you to work on, I think. Okay.